Well, I think the small number has some advantages. And the advantages is that we can have some interaction, learn from each other's kind of conversations, and have it, they're going to give a presentation, but if time allows, we'll have some time maybe for some discussion. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Good. The session title is Supporting a Family Member with a Dual Diagnosis, a Parent's Perspective. This morning, Melanie Hecker gave a breakfast expert consultation, and I explained to the audience why it's an expert consultation. Melanie is a self-advocate, but also has a job where she advocates for other people with disabilities. And it was something I didn't know is that the struggle that she is still having with not getting services from the State Department and in New York, the New York State Department of Persons with Developmental Disabilities, because of a co-occurring psychiatric disorder. So I had to offer to help her mom and Melanie in trying to make that change. I happen to know the commissioner in New York. She used to work locally in Kingston, New York, where I live. And so I think we might have an opportunity to make a change. What we're going to hear about this morning is kind of the trials and tribulations and joys of raising an individual who has a disability. And in this particular situation, an individual who has a dual diagnosis, being on the spectrum as well as bipolar. And she talked about that this morning, so I don't think I'm disclosing anything that you're not going to talk about yourself this afternoon. I've had the opportunity, and just a great opportunity, now to hear Melanie talk twice. The first time she was a keynote speaker at a luncheon address at a NADD conference in Boston. Subsequent to that, she's been invited to speak at other places across the U.S., and her next engagement, I think, is in the state of Nebraska, for the state of Nebraska. And I think we're in for kind of a very interesting experience in listening to the issues revolving around raising a child with a disability. First, her mother, Phyllis Heck, is going to be giving a presentation, followed by Melanie. Now, my prejudice is, and disclosure is that they're family, and so I'm very proud to have them present with us today, both because of their experience and also because they're family. So I thank you both very much. Dad is also here, but it looks like he's doing photography.
Thank you. A little shaky.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Phyllis Hecker, and I'll tell you a little bit about our family. Mark and I were married for 11 years, and the parents of a normal, quote-unquote, 9-year-old named Jenna when Melanie was born. At birth, she was perfectly normal. She was actually an easy baby. When children with her issues are growing up and the first children, life can be very stressful for their parents. Grandparents and friends all have a very hard time understanding, why is your child having a meltdown? Why won't they make eye contact? Why will they cover their ears when they go to a restaurant or a noisy party? They ask the parents, how come she talks so loud? Doesn't she have a volume control? Why is your child rocking or flapping their hands? Later, friends want to know as they get a little older, how come she's interrupting our conversation? How come she only wants to talk about her limited field of interest? And they say things like, can't you just tell them to stop? Melanie, I kept reminding myself, was raised by the same parents as Jenna. If there was an issue, it wasn't a parenting issue. I genuinely feel sorry for parents whose first child has these issues because the parents are often heaped with criticism or well-meaning advice that totally misses the mark. I came to realize that no one is given the same lump of clay to mold, and therefore a family can work hard to educate and support their child and still not get the same results. Melanie's issues started to develop before she was 2. She was tactile defensive. And a great example I can give you is she ripped the tags out of all her clothes. She disliked being hugged and jumped if you touched her arm. Melanie rarely answered you if you spoke to her. It was suggested that I have her hearing tested, which made sense. Thankfully, her hearing was normal. At 18 months, a specialized pediatrician told us the issue was, of course, us, older parents, only child. I was told, go buy a book. Just relax, I was told. Because I held her on the exam table, the doctor suggested I was the problem. In my mind, no normal person would leave a wiggly 2-year-old alone high up on an exam table. I knew I wasn't the cause of Melanie's issues. We took her out of that office, and we never went back. The takeaway for me was I had to follow my instincts. Melanie was then enrolled in a 2-year-old nursery school class. She was in a play group as well. Normal activities like play group only added to the feeling that she was different. There was no joint play, no cooperation. She played by herself very happily, didn't share anything, didn't hand another child a block and say, give me yours. No give and take at all. At preschool, the teachers had us on speed dial. She turned her back during circle time. We later found out she was trying to block out all the stimulation, the auditory and the sensory visual stimulation. And she couldn't even do a puzzle. My nephew would hand her a block and say, Melanie, put it here. She would be trying to put round pegs in square holes. She also had a bad habit of running in front of cars in the playground, in the parking lot, and she really had no fear. So the teachers, being very wise, said, you need to have this 2-year-old evaluated. I wasn't too alarmed. I trusted her teachers because they taught our older child. And sometimes you have a nursery school where the teachers' experiences, they have 2 years of, an associate's degree in it. These women had master's degrees in psychology, as it turned out. So we had the test done at home, and lo and behold, Melanie tested normal. So then what do you do? Well, she went back to school, and a few months went by, and the preschool teachers were still concerned. Their suggestion was a very good one. They said, do the testing at school. After all, that's where all the problems were showing up. We agreed to have the testing redone only a few months later, and it showed huge developmental delays and deficits. While I was sorry that Melanie had issues, I was very glad that we didn't stand by the normal test results, choosing to have as much accurate information as we could get. For me, the takeaway is that it helps to be open to input from the professionals working with your children, and it doesn't pay to be defensive. Early intervention with autism brings a much better outcome. I was heartbroken when it became apparent that we would have to take Melanie out of the small, warm, religious preschool we had chosen for her and send her to a school for children with special needs. This is where we learned about the Committee on Special Education. We instantly became members of a committee that we never knew existed. She needed speech therapy, not for articulation, but because she would answer people. We found out that the speech therapist consults with the OTs, who consult with the PTs, and the next thing you find out is your children have so many pullouts that you need to pull him or her out of mainstream school, which is what we did. She needed all-day kindergarten as well. We realized that as parents, we have to be willing to change course. Jenna, our older daughter, had attended a private day school. The school day was longer than the public school, and the children were taught in English half the day, and in Hebrew the other half the day. Clearly, a dual language, fast-paced school was not going to be the right fit for Melanie. We changed course yet again. We found our public schools had the services that she would need. Elementary school brought another round of challenges. At one CSE meeting, the speech teacher happily announced, Mel no longer needs services. I realized at that moment that speech was the only service Melanie was getting at the time. The chair announced, okay, great news. Melanie will no longer have an IEP if she's not receiving any services. This was not great news to me. This was very heart-stopping for me. I explained that Melanie had to have accommodations. We as a team would have to find a way that she got the accommodations that she needed. She couldn't be declassified. At that moment, you know how a little light goes on over your head? The night before, one of my cousins spoke to me about a 504 plan. I had no idea what a 504 plan was, but I knew it worked, and I knew that she was entitled to it if she couldn't have an IMP. So I put forth the idea, and everyone at the table said, oh sure, that's a great idea, that'll work. The principal will administer it. I shudder to think what would have happened if I did try to think out of the box. None of the professionals had thought to suggest it. This allowed her to keep her one-on-one, extra time for tests, a quiet place for testing, and other things that she needed. Sharing our issues with others exposed us to people who experienced and shared many wonderful ideas and parenting tips as well as programs. I felt it was important to network and listen to anyone who were in shoes similar to mine. We muddled through grades 1 through 4 with the help of a terrific one-on-one aide, a school psychologist, and mainstream teachers. During that time, we came to understand that if we didn't laugh, we would cry. And we coined phrases like Melanie meltdowns to explain the frequent meltdowns that she was experiencing both at school and at home. By the 4th grade, we started to see the mental health issues that qualify Melanie to be here as a person with a dual diagnosis. We started taking Mel to a psychologist who turned out to be a poor fit for our family. He admitted, after seeing her for many months, that he couldn't help her. He referred us to a psychiatrist, and I still felt that I needed to find a new psychologist as well. In our area, there's a shortage of both professions. I decided to go searching for a new psychologist after this doctor decided to teach Mel a lesson. He called the police when she acted out in his office and had her taken out of his office down a long, winding staircase on a stretcher to a hospital with a police escort. And this was in the next town from where we lived, so I didn't even know where this hospital was. I had to follow the police in the ambulance to this hospital, and he told me that he felt that she would stop making suicidal threats if we taught her a lesson. So here's the lesson she learned. If you act out as a psychologist, you get to cut the visit short, you get fed some really good pizza, and in a couple of hours, you go home from the hospital, which is exactly what happened. Later, we found a psychiatrist who had a part-time practice. When I needed to talk to him, I left a message on his answering machine, and I just prayed he'd hear it in time to call me back. There was also a psychiatrist later on who told me if I didn't hospitalize Melanie as she wanted to that day, she would call Child Protective Services. I got Melanie to say she wouldn't harm herself to placate the psychiatrist, and we left the practice that day. And I can only speak for myself, but in my opinion, a member of our team should not be threatening me instead of trying to work with us. If she truly thought that she was protecting Melanie, she should have called Child Protective Services. That was her right. She never did. I will no longer hire a part-time psychologist or psychiatrist. Don't give up, keep asking became my mantra. After one inpatient stay, the psychiatrist who treated Mel offered to see her at the outpatient clinic where she was transferred. We jumped at the chance. A year later, she went back to Harvard to teach, and she paved the way for us to see the head psychiatrist when she left that practice. When I told her I've been trying for 7 years to get into that practice, she smiled and just said, "You didn't know me then." And I knew we were in. That was it. So for the past 7 years, actually, I've driven 50 miles round trip to see this psychiatrist in the area. He has receptionists who take messages. They actually make sure he gets those messages, not an answering machine. And he practices at a terrific hospital that has both inpatient and outpatient services. So there was a great continuity of care there for Melanie. I wouldn't trust my house to someone who dabbles in real estate. I don't trust my child as someone who also dabbles in medicine and isn't available full-time. And that's just my own personal prejudice, but that comes from the experience that we had. Finding the middle school program was very tough. Melanie had issues in our home district involving bullying that left her very unsafe and anxious in our local middle school. We found an ally in our school psychologist. She understood Melanie had to be out of there ASAP. 5th and 6th grade, we're finding Melanie becoming more and more mentally unstable. I spent a ton of time in the vice principal's office. One thing I did to help Melanie was to take a position on the PTA. I wound up vice president of the PTA. This allowed me to get to know the teachers and especially the principals. I'd always volunteered in our community in various organizations. By getting to know the principals and allowing them to get to know me, they came to understand that Melanie was not a child of permissive or neglectful parents. She was a bright student on the autism spectrum with serious mental health issues. And I think it was important that they saw where she was coming from. Volunteering at your child's school helps your community and allows you to interact in a positive way with school officials and parents. And I underline that because a lot of those interactions when you have a child like Melanie can be not so positive. We found a program for Melanie that led to our first introduction to BOCES. There are 37 BOCES, or Board of Cooperative Education Services in New York State. It was created by the New York State Legislature in 1948, and it provides shared educational programs and services. And it's a common sense thing. So if you have 2 children with Asperger's who are bipolar in 8 different schools around, let's say, a 20-mile area, you can get them all into one classroom with the appropriate teacher, social worker, and that type of thing. So it's really been a positive experience, and it has for a lot of our friends too. Most schools just couldn't possibly set up a classroom for all the children with all their different needs. Shalma was Melanie's first BOCES program. We were told there was a program for middle school children that had a social worker, a special ed teacher, small class size, and the opportunity for Melanie to attend mainstream classes. On paper, great fit. Unfortunately, these are very tough years for a child on the autism spectrum. These years when hormones are racing are also challenging for children with mental health issues. We were dealing with both. Melanie's first hospital stay was during this time. She was very unstable. I'll never forget 2 phone calls that we received while she was in that school. One was when she tried to throw herself off a mountain on a field trip. And a male teacher was able to restrain her and stop her, but it was a very traumatic event for us, for the kids on the field trip, and of course for the staff. The second was a phone call asking me to come to school immediately, don't break any traffic rules, just get here as soon as possible. As I approached the school, I saw an ambulance parked at a side door and a squad car from their local police department. And I naively, being Pollyanna, said, that couldn't have anything to do with my Melanie. I was wrong. As I entered the school, I was directed to the principal's office. Melanie's teacher had been chastising her. She got into Melanie's face, and if you know about people on the spectrum, they do not like you to be in their space. And Melanie took a swing at the teacher. The teacher had a pacemaker, which no one at the school knew, and Melanie's aim was incredible. She actually hit her right in the pacemaker. The poor woman hit the floor, was unconscious, and was being revived by the social worker who was in the classroom. Thankfully, she was taken to the emergency room. She was fine. The school declined to press charges, although I did meet with the police officer at the scene. And for a parent who's had no interaction with the police, other than maybe I had a flat tire and they stopped to help me, very scary. We had her hospitalized that same afternoon. Most of her hospital stays were 3 to 4 weeks. The first time we had hospitalized Melanie, we did it with lots of trepidation. After that, it gets very easy. You know that she's safe. You know that she's getting the treatment and the medication she needs. And we, as a family, viewed those stays as a break or a respite for parents whose children have been hospitalized. We attended support groups, and I found myself trying to problem solve for the other participants. They didn't share our feeling at all. They saw this as, really? My kid's in a mental hospital, very tragic. We felt she was in a safe place, a locked unit, the staff was lovely, she was being evaluated, they put her in a school program. So we actually had a good time during those breaks. She was in a hospital in Saratoga Springs, New York, a beautiful place. And we went up every day, it was fine. Parent support groups, on the other hand, really depressed us, and we stopped attending them. I found myself visiting Melanie every day. Again, the hospital was an hour away, round trip. At the hospital, she attended school. Monday nights, you had dinner with your child and attended a family therapy group. The staff quickly realized that her issues as a dually diagnosed person were so different from the other kids that they could not relate to her issues. They also saw the flapping, pacing, all the things that went on, and they did not understand her. She didn't understand them. She felt sorry for the kids in the foster care system who had no parents and no visitors. She was upset when they would talk about being abused. She was upset when they talked about being covers. The doctors at the hospital eventually excused her from the group, which is mandatory for every patient at the hospital. Okay, now she's been excused from the group. They use that time to do their paperwork. Now there's no one to supervise her. So if you picture all the parents and all the kids with one staff in a room, all the other staff is doing their paperwork. Understandable, but no one to supervise Melanie. So what I would do is I would go up with a movie and a popcorn, and she and I would watch it together. Again, I had to think outside the box to meet her needs. Melanie was never assigned a roommate after her first stay. She always had a private room because the other kids just couldn't relate. While she was suspended from school, I told you about the teacher incident, she was suspended, she still had to be schooled. So we had a wonderful teacher from our home district who came every day to the house for months. I was practically a prisoner at my own home because there were very few people that we could trust to supervise Melanie at that time. During about a 2-year period, she was hospitalized 6 times. Melanie has never repeated a grade at school, despite being developmentally delayed, and one of the youngest children in any of her classes because her birthday's the end of November and the school admission date's December 1st. So she was very young, developmentally delayed, on the autism spectrum with mental health issues, and graduated at 17 with a Regents diploma. At about this time, an intensive case manager came into our lives. Thank God for Lisa. Melanie could vent with her. She could help us determine if Melanie was becoming unstable, if puberty, which also could be an issue for any teen, forget about one with these issues, was raising its ugly head, or if she was just experiencing normal teenage angst. She said that since I was managing her case and doing the work of a caseworker, she would take Melanie on outings and give me 1 hour of free time once a week, and believe me, I was grateful for it. At about this time, Melanie longed to be normal. She wanted to make friends and have a social life outside of our family. We located a one-of-a-kind social group for teens and young adults on the autism spectrum, and Melanie's going to tell you about it. She's very fond of this group. I found myself on the board and later became acting president. Her social needs were finally being met. Melanie was able to finish middle school on time despite the 6 hospital stays. Finding high school was an even bigger challenge. We looked at multiple BOCES programs. One was in a neighboring town, and it focused on how wonderfully rigorous the math and science program was. Science Melanie loved, math would have given her a nervous breakdown. I said, we cannot do this. I jokingly called it the Harvard of BOCES programs. I said, I'm not looking for Harvard, just a nice program would be wonderful. The local psychiatric hospital had a program, which was a 1-year program for high schoolers. It was in a locked unit, a transitional year type thing. To my utter shock and dismay, they refused to enroll her. They said, she's too unstable for our program. Where are you supposed to take your bipolar, autistic child when the psychiatrist at the psychiatric hospital says, go look elsewhere. We got in the car and we kept looking. It was not an easy time. There was another program in an economically disadvantaged district that we were taken to, and Mel will tell you about it. Not a good fit. We were running out of options. The last program in our area available to us was an interdisciplinary skills program. We visited their last day of school, last program available. They were having a party. I didn't even get to see how they taught. But the teacher was friendly. It was 10 minutes from our home. And we were told that if she worked hard, while no one had ever graduated from this program with a higher level Regents diploma, which you had to do quite a bit more work than a local diploma or an IEP diploma, they felt if she would do the work, it was possible. They assured us that they would tailor a program for her, and they would get her counseling. And we decided that we would give it a shot, so we did. The following year, as luck would have it, they moved to another school district with this program. And now I really had problems. Melanie had been to mainstream classes and liked her classmates. She had just gotten used to this school. She'd only been in this high school for a year. And I needed to talk her into some kind of a solution. And she did not want to change schools. So here are a couple of things we thought of doing. One, we could move ourselves. We could take our family and move from the house we've been in 20 years, where my sister and her family lived a few houses away. We had a lot of support on the street, a lot of friends, and we could move to their district, and she could go into their special ed program without this wonderful teacher in this BOCES program we just found. We could give a cousin custody of Melanie who happened to live in that district, and she was willing to do it. But it would mean Mark and I would no longer have any say over her life and her decisions, and we were not willing to do that. It did not seem like a great idea. The third thing we could do is talk Melanie into making the change. And here's how I did it. I called her religious school principal and said, what kids go to that district? And she gave me the list. And then I talked to a cousin of hers who's her age and her grade. And she said, I'll take Melanie under my wing. I'll introduce her to all my friends. And finally, Melanie was willing to make the change. She thrived there. The principal welcomed her and her classmates. There was no bullying at this school. Big deal, no bullying. This was a top-notch school district that accepted these kids from other districts with open arms. Melanie earned her Regents diploma, which was wrapped in a folder from this hosting school so that she wouldn't be any different from the other kids who were getting up and graduating. They allowed her to participate in their graduation ceremony, even though my home district issued her diploma. Ironically, she had never attended a single class in our home district, but she has a diploma from there. Now we have a graduate. We have always encouraged Melanie to do community service. In 2010, she was the high school recipient of the John Finn Community Service Award, which is given annually to youth who make significant contributions to their communities by volunteering their time and encouraging others to become involved in service activities. Melanie was selected from over 100 nominations. To give you an idea of what she's doing now, she's attending community college. She has an A average this semester, and I'm proud to say she had an average last semester. She takes 3 courses a semester because that's what she can handle. All through high school, I would tell her, in high school, maybe they won't get you. In college, they're going to say you're fascinating. And one day she came home and she said, you know, you're right, they think I'm fascinating. And that's it. See, this is what college brings. A year after she graduated, all through high school, she wanted to nominate her BOCES teacher, who was with her for all 4 years, for an award that a local television station gives to the top teachers in the area. And I said to her, you cannot do it while you're in this class. When you're out of this class next year, you can nominate him. He was the first BOCES teacher to ever win this award. Melanie nominated him. She wrote the nomination. They were featured on television. He invited her to the banquet. He got a $500 prize. It was lovely. And we just wanted him to know how much we appreciate all that hard work that he put into Melanie. Melanie has a terrific part-time job as a consultant for a not-for-profit called Youth Power. I hope I'm not mangling their slogan, but it has to do with
Nothing about us without us.
Nothing about us without us, right? Don't leave us out of the equation as you're advocating. They met her as a volunteer, and I want to stress the importance of volunteering. And they asked her to interview for the position. She didn't apply for this one. They actually asked her to interview, and then they hired her. We came to realize that Hillary Clinton was right. It takes a village to raise a child. Here's a list you can see of all the people we collaborated with. And I don't have to read them all to you, they're all up there. I will say that Mark and I were captains of the team, but I can assure you we had a large, terrific team with wonderful input. We're thankful to all of them as they helped us to raise Melanie to be a happy, healthy, and productive member of society. Mark and I credit Melanie with being open to treatment and being caring and bright. These traits have brought her much success. So we look forward to seeing where life will take her, and I want to thank you for allowing us to share our story of parenting our special child with you. And now I'd like to introduce my daughter Melanie, who will tell you what it's like.
Okay, my name is Melanie Hecker. I'm a 19-year-old college student, and ever since I was very, very little, my parents could tell that there was something, not right with me. But it wasn't until I was a teeny bit older that they finally came to a diagnosis, Asperger's syndrome. And I can tell you how they came to that diagnosis, my symptoms, and how I get over them. One of the primary things that Asperger's is, of course, social issues. I can't understand sarcasm, I can't understand expressions half the time, and I have a pretty interesting story about that to kick us off. I was maybe 4 or 5, and one Saturday morning, my mom calls up to me, "Melanie, there's a donut with your name on it." So I come downstairs, and I look through the bag of donuts, I pick one donut. Mom, where's the one with my name on it? Of course, my misunderstanding of sarcasm and euphemisms has been frustration to some people, but I really just try to take it in stride. I have been bullied because of my, I have been bullied a lot actually because of my misunderstandings. But the strategy I use for sarcasm is just sit, watch, see if it makes sense. If it doesn't, sarcasm. And with the social issues, a lot of the time I don't know when to jump into a conversation. If a conversation involves 3 or more people, forget it. I just can't jump in. And in fact, a lot of the time people will chastise me for interrupting, but I never knew I was interrupting. And that's the real Asperger hallmark, as you all might know. But there are a lot of other interesting Asperger symptoms that people might not always think about. One of my biggest issues when I was little and also now is being tactile defensive and sensory defensive. For example, when I walk into a room and there's perfume or hand lotion or Bath and Body Works, the smell, overwhelming, I feel like it stings my insides. That's what it feels like. A lot of the time people will say, "Oh, it's just perfumes, get a grip." But no, if you felt like your insides were being stung, you'd have a problem with it too. And when it comes to very loud, loud music, ba-boing, 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 that also really gets to me. People say, "Oh, well, it's just a concert, get a grip." No, you'd have a problem if you felt this way too. But my strategy for that, when I go to a bat mitzvah, a wedding, party, you name it. I really have two strategies for that. My first strategy is I always carry a piece of hard candy with me. When I put the hard candy in my mouth, it has like a calming effect. And it's a little bit like a baby pacifier, but hey, it works. My other strategy is what I call stepping out. You see, if something gets too much for me, all I do is get up, I step out for a sec, I calm down, and then I come back. And that allows me to recuperate. Now, preschool, as my mom mentioned, was pretty tough for me. When we were doing circle time, I had to have my back to the circle so I could block out all the stimulation. And when we were doing puzzles, I would be trying to put the square peg into the round hole, even as my cousin was trying to show me the right way to do it. And it was because I had such a trouble at the religious preschool that I was transferred to a preschool called ECEC. And ECEC was much more suited to the type of thing that I would need. It had better OT, better PT, more understanding staff. And there was even a really nice teacher that played guitar for us. And they would teach me how to walk on the balance beam to help me with my posture. But of course, one can't stay in preschool forever. And it eventually came the time for me to make the move to elementary school. But the thing about going into elementary school is I was being dropped from an environment where everybody had issues similar to mine, to an environment where some of the students might not. And elementary school was rather tough for me, because in those years I was overstimulated very easily. And in those years, my parents and my care worker, my carers often did not know what to do with me. I eventually went through elementary school, getting as good grades as I really could, and then came the move to middle school. Now, I knew about middle school, and I was not looking forward to it at all. My cousins and I even had this joke that we were going to run away to Jamaica and start a hair braiding salon because we didn't want to go to middle school. And middle school, there's puberty, there's trying to fit in socially. But for me, middle school was about one thing. It was about bullying. People in my middle school just plain did not understand me. They would make fun of the fact that I was not good socially. They would say things like, "No one likes you, go away." And they would even try to pull crude tricks on me, like tricking me into swallowing a piece of hard candy that was burning your mouth. And it was because of that that we eventually had to find a new program for me. And the Shellmont program was an interesting one from my perspective, because at this school, there was not very much bullying. I remember making friends there rather easily. It was a rural area, so that helped. But one of the problems with Shellmont from my perspective was the teachers. These teachers were just plain not equipped to handle a case as unique as mine. It was because of that and the reasons that my mom stated that we needed to look elsewhere once high school came. And it's like, oh, high school, how scary. And it was kind of scary, I admit. Especially considering one high school that we checked out that I will never forget. It was a program called Rebound. And it was a program in a disadvantaged area of upstate New York. And how it worked was there were 3 teachers, one for math, science, English, and they took turns teaching social studies. Small amount of students, and I think, hey, this might be nice. Now, the first class I went to when I was visiting, social studies, that went over pretty well. Then it was time for me to go to English. When I was in English, the entire time was spent by these guys in the class, I was the only girl by the way, bragging about their genitalia size and what bra sizes they like. When I tell the teacher that I'm uncomfortable with this, he says, oh, well, we're all adults here. No, you are an adult. I'm 12. I really did say that. But for me, the 2 final straws, straw number 1, I was talking with the science teacher, and there were 2 kids on her computer looking at a Holocaust joke website. She yelled at them to get off of it, and they didn't. Straw number 2, I found out that as a reward, if these kids do well in school, they're allowed to step outside and have a smoke. After that, I decided, not for me. You have no idea how relieved I was when I finally found Mr. Lockwood's program. Mr. Lockwood is somebody that was able to accept me for who I am, and his class had a policy of not turning anyone away. And I was really, really thankful for that. Having a classroom that I could go to when I was just having way too much stress was also a good thing to have. But, you know, teacher-wise, I should not give Mr. Lockwood all the credit. There are some other really great teachers I should tell you about, too. One teacher I had was Ms. Graves, my anatomy physiology teacher in my senior year of high school. And I mentioned her because she would let me, if Mr. Lockwood's room got too crazy, she would actually let me go to her classroom as a backup safety room. And when I did, and I show up unannounced, she never cared. She would break out the model skeleton or put up a diagram of a heart for me to label. And it provided me with a second safe room. I also need to mention my photography teacher. Now, while on the subject of my photography class, it's a good way to bring up the subject of a very lesser known Asperger symptom. And it's lesser known because not everybody with Asperger's has it. It's called fine motor impairment. And how I can best describe fine motor impairment is that my hands don't really work the way they should. So I can't write by hand. At both school and work, I have what's called an Alpha Smart. It's a small keyboard type device that I type my notes into, then I plug it into a computer, and it prints my notes. So that solves a handwriting problem. But I also can't tie shoes because of my fine motor impairment. And to this day, I have to wear Velcro. And in fact, it's kind of hard to explain to your squeamish lab partner why they have to be the one to cut open the rat. It's hard to explain explain to them why make a 4-inch incision on the rat's abdomen is so difficult for me. This has happened more than once, by the way. Huh? And I originally took the photography class with Mr. Dierolf because I thought that it wouldn't interfere with my fine motor like drawing or painting would. But I was actually kind of wrong, because traditional film photography is a lot more involved than you would think with your hands. But Mr. Dierolf was patient with me, and he helped me do the best I could in the class. And I still have all of my old photography supplies in my basement. Of course, then, I did wind up with all of the supports I have, graduating from high school with the Regents diploma. For those of you that are not familiar with New York State, a Regents is the highest diploma that you can achieve in New York. I was told that nobody in my class had ever done it, but I wound up doing it. And I graduated with the rest of my class, which was nice. Now I'm in college. I'm in college in the Human Services program at Hudson Valley Community College. It's a program geared towards social work. I take 3 classes a semester, like my mom said, and there are so many supports I have on the community college campus that help me be the successful student I am. We have a great disability services office called the Center for Access, where I take my tests in peace. We have a Center for Academic Engagement, which has workshops on things like organization, utilizing your textbook, utilizing your syllabus. We have a specific biology study center. And of course, who can forget the research and reference librarians? All of those supports really helped me in school. But of course, as my mom mentioned, recently I don't have just school to worry about. Because in addition to being a student at Hudson Valley Community College, I'm also an employee of Youth Power New York. Now, if you want to learn more about Youth Power, I have copies of our priority agenda right here. Now, Youth Power is the youth advocacy network of New York State. We are an organization, a statewide nonprofit, and our goal is to advocate for young people aged 13 to 28 with disabilities and with systems experience. By systems experience, I mean experience in, for instance, mental health, foster care, and juvenile justice. Now, we're working on a variety of things right now, including education reform, juvenile justice reform, ending restraint and seclusion, raising the age of criminal responsibility and foster care reform, just to name a few. And I do all that stuff volunteer. But what I really work on in my job, I was hired for a SAMHSA grant. But I wasn't hired for just any grant, oh no. I was hired for a Systems of Care grant. And Systems of Care is the philosophy that all of the different child-serving systems, like mental health, all of them should be communicating, coordinating, listening to each other, which unfortunately happens so little these days. And what I'm in charge of in this grant is making sure that young people are heard. Because one of the Systems of Care values, one of the things that we hold dear, is being youth-guided. You know, Youth Power's motto, nothing about us without us. Young people deserve to have a say in the services they receive. And through my part-time job, I'm going to make sure that they do. Okay, so I've told you the story of where I am now. But I also need to tell the story of the strategies I used and the struggles that I had to get there. You see, my Asperger's was my primary issue for a very long time. My fine motor impairment, my social issues, my sensory issues all caused me some difficulty. But as for solutions, what are my solutions to the issue of not doing well socially, of not reading faces well, of not understanding sarcasm or euphemisms? Well, what helped me is that I joined a club. Now, in high school, the club I joined was the environmental club. And the environmental club helped me a lot in terms of getting around, navigating the school, having people to have lunch with. And they helped me socially too. The environmental club met every Tuesday, and they made a big fuss over me when I won my community service award. The president and vice president of the club allowed me to sit at their lunch table. And getting to know these people just really helped me navigate the high school. Now, of course, my very first time on my community college campus was to go to a program. And while I'm there, I'm thinking about maybe I should join a club in college too that would give me the same benefit. And I saw a poster for a club called the Animal Outreach Club. And I thought, oh my God, this is perfect for me. And then I finally got to college, and what do you know? It absolutely was the perfect club for me. Another thing that would help me socially is getting support from my cousins. I had cousins or close friends in nearly every school district I went to, and I went to a lot of them. I had somebody that was able to watch out for me. If somebody has Asperger's syndrome, it makes all the difference if they have somebody that's dedicated to watch out for them. But this is National Association for the Dually Diagnosed, and Asperger's is not my only diagnosis. There's another that I have that deserves attention as well, and that is bipolar disorder. Now, you see, when I was like a young teenager, I started exhibiting symptoms